The 3D printed parts for the new design for casting parts, but I've already redesigned this. So this is what I flew, and I casted it in aluminum, but instead of having something like this, this is what it was redesigned to. Now I still need to clean this up, but you can see now we have a tube. Print these a little bit larger because of the shrinkage during casting. But this would slide over here, you would have another tube slide here, another one here, and another one here. I like that for certain parts, like the motor mounts that come out to the side. But what I noticed when I was flying it, especially that front frame tube, when you had to cut it to place it over on each side, it was okay, but I felt like there was, like it weakened the frame. Like the frame wasn't as strong as it could have been. So that front frame tube will no longer be cut into segments. And so what I found, the reason I went back to the tube sliding through some and then joining here on these pegs for other parts, is because when I tried to take the original design where the tube would slide in and then be bolted in or riveted, when you had perpendicular tubes, made it super difficult to sand cast. And sand casting is way faster than doing lost wax or lost PLA casting, which is what I was doing, was lost PLA. So it'd take me a full day to do one part, where sand casting, I could do 5 or 6 parts in a day. But I went back to this because you could still I could still sand cast this if I wanted, but I like the strength that it gave. I'm still doing these in lost PLA, but with sodium silicate, you could make a connection that was sodium silicate that fit through. You could still sand cast it at certain angles and then pull out the sodium silicate and put it back in your sand casting. So it is possible to sand cast these parts, but really difficult when you had perpendicular tubes, like the parts that we were skinning with fiberglass and carbon fiber. This is my first sand casting, and there's some mistakes in there. There was actually a hole here, but I drilled it here so that he could, so it would match on the other side, but he could also take and rivet it into something if he wanted to use it. He does a lot of woodwork. I took away the beveled edge on this one, and I made it thicker, and I made the letters, and I took the letters down so they're not as tall and they're smaller. But I found by going small though, this sand gets stuck in it. For simple parts like this, if I wanted to cast it, it doesn't have any tubes, very easy to cast. Something like this, because I can lay it down, press it in, cover it up, and then take these apart again, take this out, and then put these back together and then pour the metal. Very easy to cast something like that. But anything with a tube, it becomes a little bit more difficult. You have to have that sodium silicate in the center of the tube to get it to cast, unless you're going to do lost PLA. Lost PLA is actually, I think, a little bit faster on that, just because it doesn't take as much time to set up. You can pour your plaster in, let it harden for 12 hours, and then burn it out within 5. And then pull the part out. Let's look first before we do. Oh, it's going to come out anyway on its own. So what I want to be careful of is it doesn't sink down. I need something. A lot of times people will take a screw and screw into that, but I should have done it before if I was going to do it like that. Because now I'm moving it around. So this, the metal will come in through here. It'll fill all of this up, but any trash that's in here that gets caught up, I need some place for it to go. So I'm gonna wiggle these around. I don't care if that comes out, but here, this will show you the problem of a tube with sand. Is this gonna take that out with it? Not a problem, I didn't want it, because like I said, that's just where I want that overflow to go. It left a little notch there. Let's see how much stayed behind on this. Ooh, we actually got a really good cast on that. So smoother edges here compared to the last one. do is flip this back over. You notice I've got 1 and 2, and on this side I've got 1 and 2. What I want to avoid though is that falling through and throwing a lot of trash down on there. So now we're ready to pour. It'll burn through these gloves, even these. A face shield would be really good. But what I'm going to do is get in here and clean up the trash. So it's going to be on the top. I'm just going to skim around this and trim up some of the trash that was in that aluminum that I don't want to pour into these other parts. And I'll do that twice. So it looks like this needs to melt down just a little bit more. It's still pretty thick. So I'm going to turn that back on. Now that I've already heated it up, and you got to be careful. Now that I've already heated it back up, I'll be able to turn it back on just by turning the gas on over here. But you got to be careful you don't blow the top off of that thing. There it goes. A lot of times I'll take the top off and then restart it. So I'm going to let that go for a little bit. So I've got to take my other mold out, the one that I did and lost PLA. This is an actual part for the paramotor. And I wait, I let it cool back down, but I still want it hot when I pour that aluminum in so it'll seep in all the crevices. But I don't want it as hot as melting temperature, but just below melting temperature of aluminum, so it can cool, but it takes longer to cool down. So this is my electric kiln. Put that in there. I want to be careful that I don't shake it around too much and break anything. Now I see some little bits that could cause some trash. So I think what I'm going to do is get my pliers and pull those out. Now I got to be careful because that's still hot. Even without that glove on, I'm going to feel this. I can feel the heat there, but I'm just removing any bits that might get washed down in there. Everything else looks like it's fairly secure. All right, that looks like it's good melted. Skim off the top again. Oh yeah, nice and shiny. Get any trash out of there. So a lot of this stuff, a lot of this trash just sticks to this spoon. Oh shit, didn't mean to do that. All right, look how hot that is. That's red hot. That spoon got red hot being in there. And then whatever we have left over, we'll pour in this other one. So, pour, man, that stuff is super hot right now. It's like glowing red. I got it way hotter than I normally do. All right, that'll get down in there. And now, let's see if we can pour this one. Get it in there. Keep pouring, keep pouring, keep pouring. What I should have done is created a vent on the back side for it to come up. But that'll work. Not perfect. So what I should have done, where I messed up, is I should have made another area for that to grow into so I could see that it had run all the way through. But that'll work for now. So this one looks like we got a good pour. It's slowly cooling off. Like if I step, you could probably still see this shake, but you can see those crystals kind of going across. You can see this one's caught the wood on fire, but it's also burning over here. So whatever that sand is mixed with is also on fire right now. We'll blow that out. I'm going to turn my fan on so that doesn't blow into the garage, and then I'll show you what it looks like. So what I've found is if I let these slowly cure, they look way shinier. They don't have that dull gray. If I quench them too fast, they get that dull gray. All right, let's go ahead. Let's pick this one up. drop it off so we can handle it. This one, boy, that was just barely got a pour on that one. I'm going to glue those on next time. I think I'll make the spout and the modulus and all that stuff. I'll use a formula to try to get it to reduce shrinkage, and I'll print those off so I can just glue them on. I like to be able to glue them on, so if I don't like where I 3D printed, I don't have to reprint the whole part. But I just want to get some of this out. Another thing that I did, and I don't know if it's helping, but I wanted graphite on there, and I didn't have any graphite to sprinkle on it, like a dry lubricant. I was using talcum powder. Before I put the talcum powder down, I took a pencil and just kind of used the graphite in that and traced around on the inside and then sprinkled it. And then this turned out way better than the last one, and it's even smaller letters. Now, for the parts for the paramotor, I don't really care how they look right now. We're just testing them out. But later on, I'll try to improve their appearance, make them better and better, and maybe even anodize those. All right, now that I've got it kind of roughed out. Let me see how hot that is already. Yeah, we better grab some gloves. We're going to take the Dremel. With the Dremel, we'll be able to do it by hand. So a lot of this work, except for that. The larger stuff I want to do with the angle grinder, smaller detail and polish I'm going to do with the Dremel. This is the first one we did, and when we did that sand casting, some of the sand pulled away, so we had some mistakes. We also had a hole over here. We drilled that one out, and then we drilled another one on the other side so that it could be riveted in. But this smaller one, I took and beveled the edges. I made the text so it didn't stand out as far. So I polished it off with polishing compound and with some different polishing brushes on the Dremel, and just run that in. So with this beveled edge, so I made the edge beveled around the side, and so that made it easy to pull away from the sand, and the text didn't stand out as far. So that made it easier to pull it out of the sand. So here's the first one that I made. Sand fell here, so I drilled that hole out, and I just made another drill hole on the other side so it could still be used and riveted into place. And I just put polishing compound on, but I didn't really polish it down quite a bit. So it left some of the rough edge from the sand. This is the 4x2. This one is 5x2.5, and it's not as thick. And you can see there's some issues here on the back. This one's 4x2. This one I did use some of the polishing compound and use different tools on Dremel to get it polished down a little bit further. So this one turned out way better. Again, this is sand casted. That's the one that I showed in the example. I'm also going to do this in lost PLA and see if I can get a better example. This is the tri-connection that we molded yesterday. I'm going to move that over. So what I'll do is clean that up a little bit. This is our sprue, and then the other connection to that will burn out. But I'm going to clean this up and we'll burn that PLA out. It fits right inside here. And then we'll program it, and we'll go from 250 Celsius to 350 Celsius to 700 Celsius. About 2 hours for each one of those, and then we'll let it cool down nice. 250 degrees Celsius, that's just to heat up that mold. And then I go to 350 degrees Celsius, and that's really to start melting that PLA and burn it away. Then I go to 700 degrees Celsius, and that'll really burn off the rest of the PLA and leave a void. And that's what we're going to pour the aluminum into, but I don't want to do it right away. I cool that mold off, and then after it cools for about an hour to 2 hours, ideally about 2 hours, then I'll pour my aluminum in. And then I'll let my aluminum cool. I'm learning now that if you cool it off too fast, it may still be functional, but it doesn't look as good. So I've been letting these cool overnight. This one I quenched maybe an hour after I poured it. This one is one that I'll let cool for much longer, several hours at least. Maybe even overnight, I can't remember, but much shinier. And I know this one still has some plaster on it, it's just because it has some pitting from that cooling process. But same part, or a mirror image of the part, different cooling. Now I don't know if that'll affect the strength. We'll do some strength testing later on, but that's what I'm about to show you on this one. This one was allowed to cool overnight, so this first part is the sprue. And I just connected it to an old part so that if we had any shrinkage, it normally happens up here closer to the top, closer to the sprue, because it cools faster. And really what I need to do is put something for all the trash, if any trash falls down in there. That's more common with sand casting, but it can happen on lost PLA. And there's formulas that you can use to offset the shrinkage or to adjust for the shrinkage so you can print a larger part, which is what I'm doing, but I didn't use a formula, I just did it playing by ear. So this is our tri-connection, this piece here. This was another part we had made before, but I can see a lot of shrinkage in that. And that's because it was closer to the surface to where the cooling happened. So if I can put this further down, it's less likely to get shrinkage. All right, I'm going to take my reciprocating saw, find a good area. And then we'll throw this sprue back into the aluminum and melt it back down. And then we'll clean that part out. So I'm going to go ahead, clean that plaster out. I'm just taking a screwdriver, just busting through that. And then we'll scrape it off. There we go. Trying not to get this stuff all over me. Mainly 80% plaster of Paris. I'm using about 10% to 15% talcum powder, just so that it doesn't shrink as bad, and about 5 to 10%, depending on the mixture of talcum powder, of Portland cement. So now we got that. Let me go get that other part. I still need to take my Dremel and clean around the edges.